Well, here we are on another Monday morning. I hope everybody's doing okay today. Appreciate all the views I got on my last video. I'm going to give you a few little pointers and items today to talk about problem solving, working on cars and all that. I had these Vanishing Breeds. A lot of you guys that have been around as longer than I have will remember all of the different vehicles that we used to work on. The Rambler. You ever worked on a Rambler? And AMC was American Motors. It's a Rambler kind of morphed into that. My mother had a 60 model Rambler that I was with her when she bought it. My sister wore it. It was blue with a white interior. Excuse me, white with a blue interior. And we took a green 54 Chevrolet in there, and we traded it in on that. I was like 3 years old, standing in the seat playing with a steering wheel on that old Chevrolet, and we traded it in. And that Rambler wasn't nearly as good of a car as that 54 Chevrolet, only my dad didn't know that whenever he sent her over to buy it. AMC Plymouth. Plymouth disappeared in about 1995. Mercury disappeared very recently. A lot of Mercury still running around out there. Lincoln Sedan, you know, the Lincoln Town Car, the Lincoln Continental, they've been gone for a while. You know, the Mark 8s and all that stuff. Pontiac's been gone. That was a disappointment to a lot of us that loved the Pontiacs. Oldsmobile's gone. It disappeared in 2004. The last car they built was the, not the Aurora, but the other one I've worked on. That's a really amazing how whenever you get older, there's words that you know as good as you know your own name and you can't think of them and all that. But I'll think of it in a minute, or if I don't, you'll know which one I'm talking about. And the last ones they made. And Saturn. There are still Saturns running all over the place. I've worked on every one of these makes of cars. Saturns I always didn't care for. They were a sort of a, I don't know, they were kind of a, General Motors played favorite with Saturns for a while and took money from other divisions to shore them up and all that. And the other divisions didn't really care for Saturns. But those are actually apparently some pretty decent cars, because everywhere I look, I see Saturns still running around, and they haven't made them for a while. DeLorean, I've actually worked on one of those. My buddy owns one, and I worked on it before he bought it, when it still belonged to the, and the way that happened, the guy that was the general manager of the dealership, he was the general principal of the dealership where I worked. I saw a DeLorean sitting out there outside of his office, because he had a side entrance to where he could leave his office without having to go through the showroom. And I saw it sitting there, and I went in there, and I said, "What's that DeLorean doing sitting there?" He said, "Well, it's only got 8,000 miles on it. It's been sitting in a garage, and this guy was wanting to trade it to me for a new pickup truck." And I said, "Well, you know, if you're a car collector, it might not be a bad one to have, because there's not all that many DeLoreans still around." I think they only made 8,000 of them or something. But that car still runs. My buddy owns it now. Anyway, there's others. Ford's, you know, Fairlane, Granada, LTD, Crown Victoria, F100. Bronco 2, Tempo, all of those went away, you know, along with the Pinto. You know, now there are some European brands that are still using those names, because whenever an automaker owns a name, that name remains. Like that old blue pickup truck, the 80 model pickup that I had actually done an article about, done a video about a while back. It was an Explorer. The Ford already owned that name even before they came up with the Explorer platform, the vehicles that like the Explorer I drive. And that one right there, that's a Bronco 2. I saw that one at the bank one day. It's beautiful old Bronco 2. That lady still drives it. And those things are getting really, really rare. They're getting hard to, those are harder to come by than a big Bronco, you know, the old big Bronco. High mileage F150. This was a bad idea job here. This guy came in here dead in the water, time and chain had failed, and he had just bought the truck, and it didn't run hardly any time. You know, he bought it as is, like people do, and the time and chain came all to pieces and everything in there, all those little sliders and that kind of thing. And I told him, I says, really, you need for it, let us put a motor in this thing. You know, get one from LKQ. It's got some warranty left. It's a low mileage engine and all that. Put it in there. And no, he said he wanted us to try to patch it, you know, because at the college we weren't charging any labor, but we did charge part plus 20% plus tax, and that could still run into a pretty big bill. He wanted to go ahead and do that. I said, I think it's a bad idea. It's probably not going to still not going to be right even after we put a timing chain in it. So we put a timing chain. What the deal is, if the oil pressure on that engine drops below about 25 or 26 pounds, those oil operated timing chain tensioners that push on those slides that keep the chain snug, those things begin to not work right, and you hear rattling in the front of it and all that. Well, the customer wanted to go ahead and attempt the repairs, and we went ahead and we put the timing chains in there, got it running, it cranked and ran beautifully, but as soon as it started to warm up, we started hearing timing chains rattling. And I said, well, we could put some main bearings in it and rod bearings and all that. So we went ahead and put bearings in it. It was better, but I could still tell it was going to be a problem. And I kept telling the guy, I said, now you're into this thing. I think that by this time we had $2,500 in it. I mean, it was a lot of money that we had in it. And of course, we did some other work on it too. Also, as I remember, the roller rockers on one head were all shot, which was bound to be related to the lower oil pressure. And so we went ahead and replaced all the roller rockers on that head. And I don't remember everything that we did, but it was a lot. It was a heck of a lot of work that we did to that thing. But typically, what goes bad on those, from what I've able to gather, is the cam saddles where the cam bearings, where the camshaft spins. They get wallered out just enough to where the oil pressure goes squirting out between the camshaft and its saddle, and it lowers the pressure on all the rest of the engine, which, those bearings, those timing chain tensioners would depend on good strong oil pressure. And so basically I just told him to, you need to put the right oil in these 5.4. This was 5.4, by the way. I mentioned that to begin with. But I think he decided he was going to go ahead and take it and run some thicker oil in it, maybe put a little motor honey in it to keep it going. It was his son's truck that he bought it. I don't know how much he paid for it or anything, but he wasn't mad at us or anything, because he's the one that made the calls on that. We went and went with it. And that girl that did this, y'all, learned a heck of a lot about putting timing chains in these 5.4s and all. But anyway, that was an interesting set of circumstances. Now, we did a Dodge job with a timing chain. And the crazy thing about this job, these engines tended to get sludged up really, really bad. And whenever they get so terribly sludged up, it's a good idea to go ahead, if you're going to try to salvage the engine, is go ahead and put a timing. That's what we did. This is on the engine stand there in the shop. We bought a timing chain set, and we put that thing together, and this isn't all the parts to it, but you kind of get the point. The big deal about this, the kit that we bought came with this chain, these sliders, and actually came with, of course, that, what this is for, but it came with these sliders, these chains, and this thing right here. This is super, super important on these, because if you're not really careful, the first kit that we got for this thing had the wrong chain, had the wrong one of these. And I told the guy that was laying all the parts out, getting ready to put the chains in the engine where we had it on the stand, and I says, you better compare this to what's in the one that came out of there. And when he did, it was a different one. And so I says, we cannot use this one. You need to send it back. So, I've got the parts guy to come get it and bring it back in to get us one that was the right one. I have known of people going all the way up, swapping out an engine, and the engine they put in there had a different cam reluctor pattern, and they had a no start, and that's a mess. Now, some of the engines you can swap out this thing, this cup. On some of them you can't, because it's riveted to the gear and all that. Anyway, that's super important. Now, this first set, again, had the wrong cam sensor reluctor. The ones that we, if you look at this, you've got these, the way these teeth are, they go through there. You got 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1. Okay? Now, if the pattern is not exactly like that on that, you're going to have something that the engine controller has no idea what to do with. And that's a big deal. This is number 1 cylinder right here. And so that's the way that was supposed to be lined up. It's a good waveform. This is a compression waveform, with your compression stroke, and then it's coming over here. That's your exhaust stroke, and this is your intake stroke, and then it squeezes it again and all that. But the point is, this was the crank sensor up here. I just kind of chopped it off, but that's your cam, and these have got to be just alike on that. All right. So once we once we got it put back together, I may have this one confused with another Dodge job that we did time and change on. The crazy thing about this is that from the parts store at the time when we bought this time and change said it was like $500, which was ridiculous. We have 3.7 in another one, and I think that's the one that's pictured right here. The guy that did the job was really good, but what he did on that 3.7 was, you know, if you take those little new time and chain tensioners that come with a kit, they got a little piece of foil on the back of those things, you know, to keep trash from getting in there where the oil gets pumped in to cause the tensioner to work. That guy left the foil on one of those things, and the tensioner wasn't even working, and boy was that a noisy mess. We pulled the timing cover and all back off and started enough to say, oh man, there's not oil pressure going into that new tensioner. So we went ahead and got another new tensioner, and we put it on there and got it straightened out. But for some reason, and I don't remember what it was now, oh, it had an oil leak. He had to pull the head off of one side of it. And whenever he was putting it back together, I said, you need to have all those roller rockers out of that head when you put the head back on there, because you don't want any valves open, because you don't know where the pistons are, and this is an interferent engine. And so he wouldn't listen to me, and he went ahead and put the head back on and bent 3 valves. So he had to pull the head back off and replace the valves that he bent. I mean, he bent the valves putting it on there and torquing it down because he wouldn't listen to me. I said, you got to make sure that everything is in place. You know, the cam shafts can be turned any kind of way when the roller rockers aren't in there. It won't open the valves. So you put everything in place. You line up all the timing marks. You put it all, and then you put the roller rockers in last. And he didn't actually. I should have explained that to him better. That was partially my fault. But anyway, he got a lot of good experience on that. And so you can see there's where those marks lined up with, you know, all the, you know, get the colored links and all this. You've seen that. You got everything lined up just right. Pretty dicey. And there's another shot of that, you know, that Dodge job on that. So this is the camshaft reluctor. There's not one on this side. There's only one. Most of these that don't have variable cam timing will only have one of these on one side. They won't have it on both sides unless they've got variable cam timing. All right. So I used to keep them guys busy whenever we get some of the college cars out there. That's that 03 Crown Victoria that I made a video of putting the differential rear end seal in a while back. Actually, that's probably one of the first videos I ever put on my YouTube channel. It was the most popular one for a long time. Anyway, that car right there, I had them out there. I'd keep them all washed up. We did vehicle inspections on all the college cars and everything. We had like 19 cars we had to inspect, and it gave these guys a really good look into what it's like to do fleet maintenance, which is basically what we were doing, you know. And fleet maintenance is pretty cool because whenever you're doing fleet maintenance, as long as you keep everything greased and maintained, then the work is all easy work. Occasionally you'll have a little tough job to do. I learned that when I was working down in Texas. When you keep everything greased and oil changed and the fluids checked, there's not a whole lot of real heavy duty work to do, although you will have some. Now these are 3 good students here. This guy right here, I don't know where this guy wound up, but he was one of my best students I had. I ran live work through here all the time, just like it was a garage, because I felt like they needed to be feel the pressure of what it was like to have to get a job done so that people could drive the car home. All right. So this guy right here, he wound up going to work at a dealership. He left the dealership and went to another place, and they begged him to come back because he was so good at upsell. The dealership was. After this guy left, the dealership's labor hours in the shop went into the toilet. And when the labor hours went into the toilet, the powers that be started trying to analyze how and why that happened, and they found out that the labor hours went into a hockey stick, a downward hockey stick, when this guy left because he was so good at upsell. This other guy up here, he actually was doing an alignment on that one. You know, I taught him to sit in the seats and, you know, do your back and forth for your wheel and get your caster setting and all that. But anyway, all 3 of these guys were really good students. They were all really busy all the time, and I really enjoyed teaching these guys. Well, I don't know where this guy went to work. I mean, I probably could dig and find out, but I knew that wherever he went, he would do good work. This is this week's Dead in the Water ride. This is an expedition that's sitting over here by a used tire store, and it's been sitting there for about 6 months. You know, and it's just kind of sitting there dead. I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't know if the time and change crapped on it or whatever. it'll have a 4.6 in it because of the age of the vehicle, looking to me like. But anyway, I see that, and I just popped a picture of it on the way by. And this right here was my resistor memory code bug. You guys that are familiar with the old memory code, when they came out in the 40s when they had these ceramic resistors with the colors on them, they had this, off-color bunch of words that you would say in order because it would give you, your colors for this setup right here. So I came up with my own, and had my students memorize it because I usually had a lot of girls in my program, and I didn't want to say that other one, and I'm not going to say it here. But I came out with Big Billy ran over young George because Vicky grew weed. If you say that a couple of times and you think about how funny it is, you can generally remember it, and that would be, be black, brown, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, gray, white. Now your first stripe on your resistor is your first digit, your second one is your second digit, and your third one is how many zeros. You see, in this particular case, your red is basically going to be, that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you got to remember, black is 0 and white is 9, okay? And so you can actually, sometimes you can have, put a different word there, and this will be silver. But this tolerance band over here is basically either 2% or 5% for the most part. And most resistors are color coded like this. So red's going to be 2. Blue, see, was basically going to be, where's blue down here? Blue's down here. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's a 6 right there. So it's 1, 6, and then red would be 2 again. So 2 zeros, so that's 1600 ohms. That's not too difficult. I used to give my students, that is the one thing I did. I taught my students how to do this, and a month later, I went back and I gave them a whole bunch of random tests on these resistors and had them code them, and they got just about every one of them right because they remembered that. It was a good method of teaching. All right, this is that same guy I showed you in the other picture there, and he was putting carpet in this Eldorado. We actually had the president of the college bought this Eldorado. It's a 71 model with a 500 cubic inch engine in it, and we did a pretty good bit of work on it. But what happened was whenever you could actually stomp on the floor and it was rusted out. I mean, it was scary as all get out because if you jumped on it, you'd go through to the pavement and all. So we ripped all the carpet out of it. I sent it over to the welding department, and the welding instructor over the main one. I mean, there were 2 or 3 of them welding instructors. He actually was somebody that was into fixing up old cars anyway, and so he completely rebuilt the floor pan in this thing, and he welded brand new, beat it to fit and all that, got, parts of old car fenders and everything, and he made a really nice floor plan for that. And then we actually put fresh carpet in there that the president had bought. Believe it or not, this thing had automatic climate control on it. It still worked. Anyway, and the air conditioner was cold too. So put that thing on there. This was Bobby, one of them other guys in it. See how long that hood is on that thing? That's a cool picture right there. There's a bunch of my other cars sitting out there that we had to work on at the time. I could give you that old car is the Escort we used to drive. I taught him how to drive a stick on that one. That one was given to me. It had 250,000 miles on it. They said it had a blown head gasket. I ain't never seen a blown head gasket on that thing. It ran like a new car. That old car there was given to me by the Toyota T10 outfit. I lit off the airbag in that one. You can find whenever right before I got rid of it. And that's an old police car that we had. And that's a bug that we were in there for a water pump. And that was a Mercury Sable that I wound up getting from somewhere. Somebody gave it to us. And then there's that 99 Ranger. So I had other trainer cars besides that, but that's all it was. We put seat belts in this too, by the way, so that he would have, we just put lap belts. And, it was a convertible. But he still drives that car. And that thing runs good and looks good and everything else, Now this right here was a Jeep engine swap. Just got a little brief thing that, the coil rails on these Jeeps, they got it's basically got all those coils built together. And so when you look at them, you're thinking that the first coil is for cylinders 1 and 2, and the second one's for 3 and 4. And that's not the way it works. You got 1 and 6, you got 2 and 5, and you got 3 and 4. Each coil fires companions, right? All right, so we put this motor in there, got it all in there, and we swapped the motor out. And the motor that came in it, that they brought to us, had a coil rail on it. Well, it turned out that coil rail was wired, the coils were wired differently in that coil rail than they were in the vehicle, in the original coil rail. So when we would drop that motor in there, that motor would kick back like it had spark plug wires across or something. And so we wound up having to pull the coil rail that was on the other engine and put on there. So just remember, on these Jeeps, all these coil rails are not created equal. That's really important. So make sure you've got the right one for the vehicle, because that engine controller is going to fire those little, it's got one hot and 3 triggers in that little coil rail. And it's basically, the thing's about that long. It goes all the way from one end of the engine back. This is an I6. Okay, this is a bad idea. Don't do this, because what happens is you'll come back and you go to the trouble to fix this stupid thing. This was something that happened. One of my students put the transmission back in. He pinched the harness, and we had issues. So it's just not a good thing to do. Make sure you stay away from that. This one here, the customer had to install this belt this way. Just whenever a customer doesn't have a diagram to go about with the belts, they'll just do it any kind of way. We had a Cadillac one time, I think it was a 94 Cadillac that came in there, and somebody had put a totally wrong belt on this vehicle. And the belt that they put on it was not even the right length. But that person kept working with that belt until they figured out a way to put it on there and make it work. Now that confused the ever-loving crud out of us, because whenever we got the replacement belt, I don't remember when we were replacing the belt, but we were that one was working just fine, but we were going to put a belt on it because we had put a water pump or a tensioner, I can't remember what the deal was. Anyway, we got the belt off the vehicle, and when we stretched it out next to the belt that came from the parts house, it was a totally different belt. A greatly different length and all that. And then we pulled up a belt routing schematic and figured out that the belt that was from the parts house was the right one, which sometimes when you get a belt from the parts house, you'll get one that's not the right length or something, that you can't get it on there, it's too loose or too tight or something like that. In this particular case, they did send the right belt, but the belt that was on the car was a totally wrong belt, but some slick son of a gun had figured out a way to route it and make it work, which you can do that if you want to take your time. One time there was a van that somebody called me about, and they said that it was running too cold and they couldn't figure out what the problem was with it. And I said, well, that's usually the thermostat is making it run too cold. And whenever they told me they finally got figured it out, they told me that it turned out that somebody had misrouted the belt and the water pump was spinning backwards or something. I don't know if that was, I couldn't wrap my head around that, but that may have been what the deal was. This right here is a 2002 Santa Fe that had been to the dealer somewhere in some city, and the dealer and this guy and his wife brought it over there, and they said, we've had this thing at the dealer about half a dozen times trying to get the air conditioner fixed, and they've done a whole bunch of work on it, and we've spent like $3,000, $4,000 on it, and we don't know what to do. Wondered if you could look at this. And so I looked up on the shop manual material that we had, and I had the mechanic that was going to work on it. He did the little button dance to pull the codes out of the climate control system, and it turned out that the evaporator thermistor was bad. It wouldn't, the compressor wouldn't run. The evaporator thermistor was bad, so he jerks the dash out of this thing, goes in there and replaces that evaporator thermistor and fixes the air conditioner for $28. Because once again, at the school we didn't charge any labor because we weren't allowed to. The guy had given the dealership time after time after time. They hadn't fixed it, and they were just at the end. They were going to get rid of this vehicle and trade it in if nobody could fix the air conditioner. Well, we fixed it for $28, and the guy came to me when he was feeling that air conditioner cooling and saw that it was working right. He came to me privately and he said, can I give this guy that worked on it a tip? Because most of the work was done by this guy here, who was one of those good students I showed you in a previous picture. And I says, yeah, I said, you can't give me a tip, but you can definitely give him one. And I don't know that there's any rule against it, but I'm not going to say anything about it. If you want to give him some money, give him some money. And he opened up his wallet, and he had 8 $20 bills in there. And he handed that guy every one of those $20 bills. It boggled my mind. That was the biggest tip I ever saw anybody give in my shop anyway. All right, this isn't borrowed from a social media post. Here's a Tesla service vehicle that goes to help Teslas that are broke down. And here they are at the gas pump. It's got a gas burning engine in it. It's Ford Transit basically is what it was, but it's got the Tesla name all over it. You know, they bought a Ford to service Teslas with, and it's a gas burner. Thought that was just kind of comical. All right, this is a well-known timing belt clip method. Once you know, some of these timing chains are trying to, these camshafts are trying to turn because the valves have got spring tension on them and all that. And once you get your timing marks all lined up and everything, you want to clip those with, you know, with these bulldog clips or whatever you want to call them, so that you can make sure that they don't go doom and jump a tooth and all that, which annoys the crud out of me. And you can get that done. You'll basically get it lined up down there. We get these two lined up, and then you'll be really right where you need to be. And that's an old trick. There are a bunch of other tools that hold the camshafts in place so that whenever you put the belts on, you know, you're not having a fight with them jumping around all over the place and that kind of stuff. Whatever you can find to do that works for you is what you need to do. I used to tell my students, as long as it's in time when you're done, you know, your methodology is going to be yours. Do what works best for you. That's true whether you're putting on brake shoes or whatever, as long as your end result's the same. Here's that other student I just showed you, one of those guys. And this thing has got he pulled the cabin air filter out of this thing, and it's got all this crap laying in it. Some of these GM vans and stuff, whenever you got low airflow, open the glove box, look in there, and there's your air filter, pull it out, and it'll be all clogged up. There'll be a couple of them in there side by side. Some of the Nissans, the thing is right up against the bulkhead up in there, and they'll have a filter that's this big, I mean a great big filter, and you got to pull it out through a hole that's only half as big. It accordions, pull it out through that hole, and if you get the Nissan filter and put it back, it'll accordion down and pop back out when you get in there. Now the replacement for that, they'll send you two little filters that you stick in there, and they stack on top of one. You stick one in, it drops, you stick another one in, and it's stacked on top of it. And some of the Teslas have got a filter really, really similar to that, but theirs are actually stacked from the factory instead of that. But cabin air filters are something a lot of people don't think to check. Not every vehicle has one. We do not have a vehicle in our family fleet out here. We've only got 3 vehicles. None of ours have got cabin air filters. The Ford Contour had one. Earlier Tauruses had them, and they started turning up on everybody's vehicles because cabin air filters are pretty doggone handy. They keep the dust and the pollen out of the inside of the car. Some of your Lexus cabin air filters are made with horseradish. Some of them will have an infrared light in there to kill microbes and stuff like that. There's all kinds of technology that's been used toward this cabin air filtration stuff. Also, Teslas have got a great big filter that you can actually add to some of the S models and stuff. It's a gigantic, huge thing. And then they got another cabin air filter in addition to that underneath the glove box on some of them. I did a study on that. You can see the foam. We sprayed soapy water around that, and this compressor was leaking. That was a nasty mess. And so that's how you know you found your leak right there when you see that foam. This is all. I just give you a short one this week. I've got a lot of stuff going. I just figured I'd pop you a little video together. And so I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll give you some more pictures and stories next week.